So if you have a subscription or you pre-ordered the books and got the PDF, then you now might have the player core and the GM core in your hand. Now we've already looked at the player core now. Can link that at the end. However, this time we're going to go over the GM core. The GM core is a little bit different in that there aren't that many radical changes. There is one big new thing, at least in my mind. And there is one thing that I'm really sad to see not there. But with all that being said, my name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. Now, just to recover some information that everybody mostly will know, but if you're coming to this new, you know it might be great to know. The reason that Paizo remastered Pathfinder is largely because they wanted to remove OGL items because of things that Wizards of the Coast did at the beginning of the year. And Paizo took the opportunity to change the layout to make it a little bit better or structure the books as they saw it would be better, as well as include some errata changes and other opportunities to restructure classes, make some changes to make the game more fun to play, and this was really the golden opportunity. To that effect, though, in this particular video, I'm not going to be covering the individual name changes because of changes from the OGL or the SRD, but I do want to do a broader topic of what you can expect to get out of the GM core. Although, aside from the layout, there are much fewer changes to this than the player handbook to player core. It really is a totally new book, but it is just a combination of the game mastery section in the player handbook and the game mastery guide, and kind of rearranged it and mashed those two books together so it makes more sense. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and move into kind of an overview of the book in general. So what's different? Well, the big thing to notice is there are 70-ish more pages, and it is largely because they added the game mastering section from the player handbook, the Lost Omens section from the player handbook, and some other changes here and there. They did get rid of some variant rules, and they did get rid of the NPC gallery, which is one of the things I really don't like. It's not more because, once again, they did lose some things. And I do hope that, especially the NPC gallery, Snares, a few other things might come in Monster Core. I'm not entirely sure. But one of the things that I do want to show is it was the same in the player core, and it is the same here. The navigation sidebar, which was fantastic to begin with, is now supercharged. It might be a little bit smaller in text, but it is much more detailed. And just like the table of contents, it has more detail. And because it's on the side of every page and the subsections are highlighted now as opposed to just the main sections, you know exactly where you are and where you need to go within a certain section. I feel that with the level of information and information density in the GM core, this sidebar is amazingly useful. Then the other thing I can really say about GM Core is that the GM Core really is a combination of the player handbook, game mastery section, and the game mastery guide. Because of that, they did kind of mash them together into a series of sections that makes amazing sense and that actually makes it a lot easier to find information. I think it's incredibly useful. All that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the individual sections. So moving on to running the game. The individual subsections are largely the same, but they have been organized into a really good order that makes a lot of sense. For example, you start off with a little choose your own adventure style section telling you what chapters you might want to take a look at depending on what you are doing. And I'll show a little excerpt of it as opposed to showing the whole entire section. But you can look at this and say, well, I'm going to be running a pre-created adventure. Well, then you might want to look at these sections. If you're going to build your own adventure, it has sections to go to. It really does make it easy for you to understand what exactly you might need to see if you're a brand new GM. Then going into running the game and creating a welcoming environment, then character creation. And I like the fact that they added a nod to session 0 here in this section, as well as preparing for the adventure and so on and so on. It's not really a departure from the old version, but it does seem so seamless when it is all in one book to have all of this information at the beginning. Now, I'm going to be kind of talking about this a bit, but there is a lot, and I mean a lot of subsections moving around. But if you compare them to the original sections in the player handbook and the game mastery guide, they are the same. The wording is pretty much exactly the same. And when I say pretty much, I mean 99.5% the same. It is very rare that I saw an actual change in verbiage. It was just more intelligently laid out and in a way that, at least to me specifically, makes sense if I was just starting. I'm really, really impressed with the new order that the book is in, and I really do like it. Now, I mentioned it before, and I'm probably going to mention it a few times as we go through, but the side navigation is just top notch in this section in the GM core, since this particular section is so information dense. In the game mastery guide and the player handbook, you pretty much just had the sections laid out with maybe subsections. This goes multiple levels down so you know exactly where you are in the book. It really lets you know where to find all the information and where you might want to go next. Next, we go into the building game section. Now, on the first page, you'll see where to go for information like campaign structure, adventure design, variant rules, encounter design, hazards, and more. And it's all on the sidebar so you can see it really easily. But one thing I don't see here, and it's the snares. Snares aren't in hazards, nor are they in the treasure trove section. And I did do, just a search of the PDF. Maybe it'll be coming in Monster Core. I really don't have any idea, but I'll throw it on the screen here. But there is a section in the Player's Handbook Game Mastery section on page 589 that does show you what snares are, and they just aren't in this book or Player Core. So I'm hoping they don't go away. Again, this is not a new version, so you can use snares from the Player Handbook Game Mastery section, but I'm just not sure why they're not in GM Core. And then a note on the variant rules. They only included the 4 most popular, including automatic bonus progression, free archetype, level 0 characters, and proficiency without level. There are some like stamina and those that weren't as popular. Once again, you can still use those. They're just not going to be in this book, and you'd have to go Player's Handbook, Game Mastery Guide, as well as it'll still be up on Archives of Nethys, so you can see it. It isn't like you're trying to bring something from first edition into second edition or first edition into the remaster, or for all that matters, Starfinder into the remaster. You can still use those things. They're just not specifically in the books. Now we move on to the next section, which is the Age of Omens section. And in truth, it is largely the Lost Omens section from the pre-remaster Player's Handbook, down to the regions, cultures, creatures, religion, factions, nations, settlements, and planes. It isn't different at all. The images still look the same. So if you like the Lost Omens section from the Player Handbook, you will like the Lost Omens section from GM Core. It is pretty much that transplanted here. Now we get into quite possibly one of my favorite sections, because I do love me a good subsystem, and that is here in the GM Core. Now, I haven't really noticed any big changes to the subsystems. I had thought during some of the lives and some of the con panels that there were going to be making changes to the victory point system, but I actually pulled up the chase subsystem and went through it paragraph by paragraph, and I didn't really see any changes. It's pretty much exactly the same. So I'm going to be doing a bit of a side-by-side comparison for these, as this really is one of my favorite sections of the book. There are some that I was pretty sure that they were going to do, and the one I'm thinking off the top of my head is infiltrations. But on first pass of it, I really didn't see that much, but I didn't do a deep dive into it, so I'll be doing that as well. The next section we go to is the treasure trove and the treasure tables that are kind of added on the end of it. They're technically their own section, but it is the last chapter of the book. Now, once again, there aren't too many changes. There might be some name changes. There might be some things for OGL or SRD reasons. However, it is pretty much a reorganization of the existing material with some name changes, but For me, there was one, actually, it's not just for me, there was one big thing to look at, and that would be shield runes, which are on page 232. I really do like what they say here. So in shield runes, it says, though shields can't be etched with weapon or armor runes, they can be improved by a specific type of fundamental rune. And they give you a reference to page 225 for fundamental runes, but it's known as a reinforcing rune. Reinforcing runes can be etched only on shields, including specific shields. So it's not just the general wood shield or steel shield. You can do it on specific shields, and every reinforcing rune includes maximum hardness and hit point values. This will allow you to use one of those great specific shields and not worry about breaking, or maybe not blocking with it ever because you want to use the properties of the shield without actually worrying about breaking it. Now, since the runes work by increasing the structural integrity of a shield by a certain amount, they can't increase the durability of a shield beyond a listed maximum value. And shields cannot be etched with property runes, only reinforcing rune. Now, we'll kind of cover one here real quick. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we'll do a reinforcing rune, and it's an item 4+. Does have the magical trait. Usage, it's etched onto a shield. The reinforcing rune makes a shield significantly more durable, allowing it to effectively block more powerful attacks. Now, we're only going to go over one type, but that would be a minor reinforcing rune, which is level 4. It would cost 75 gold pieces, and the shield's hardness increases by 3. It gains an additional 44 hit points, and its breaking threshold increases by 22. A maximum of 8 hardness, 64 hit points, and 32 breaking threshold. Now, going back to kind of what they said before, you can't go beyond those limits that it states in the particular type of reinforcing rune. And the other thing I could mention here is that although there are some alchemical items here, it looks like the bulk of these are going to be part of the Alchemist and Player Core 2. The next section we have is technically almost a subsection, but that is the treasure table. The treasure table has been moved to its own section at the end of the book, although it's adjacent to the treasure trove section. So at least in my one day of looking at this book, I still kind of think of it as part of the treasure table. And then we're kind of done with the main sections of the book, and we have the glossary/index, which I've said it a few times in a bunch of different reviews on Paizo books specifically, but one of the greatest ideas ever. I realize it's not just Paizo and Pathfinder books that do this, and other books not having to do with tabletop role-playing games do the same exact thing, but it is still the greatest idea ever, and I wish more books did them. Have a combined glossary index where you can go look up the word, get a brief definition, and if the definition isn't exactly what you're looking for, a page reference to go to read more detail. I think it is super helpful when you're trying to find information, especially if you're sitting at a table and you have the book open and you're paging through and you're trying to find it. You can just go to that glossary/index. Hope that the glossary gives you enough information to do what you want. And if not, it gives you a page reference to go to. Or if you're doing it with a PDF, super easy to do. Now we get into maybe the bad parts about the GM core. And it isn't necessarily bad. It's just, for me, it's what's missing. And one of the things that they did take away, and this was taken away, was there's no NPC gallery anymore. Maybe it'll be part of Monster Core, and I really hope it does come into that book, but I think it would have been extremely useful in the GM Core. I very specifically use it pretty often and have used it within the last week, to be honest. And that's really a big disappointment for me to not have it in the GM Core, or to potentially have to wait for it until next spring in Monster Core. And then one of the other things that's really not here is some of the variant rules. As we mentioned when we were in that section, they just aren't here anymore. The ones missing, like stamina and deep backgrounds, are not something that I specifically have used, but they will still be available. Once again, this is not a new edition. It is just a remaster of the current edition. So you might need your old books, or you might need to go to Archives of Nethys to show them to your players if it's something you would like to use, or to look them up yourselves. Once again, you can use your old books or Archives of Nethys in order to look up these variant rules that aren't there anymore. Fortunately, it seems like all the subsystems are still there, and that still is one of my favorite sections. So, what do I think of the GM core? I think that the layout is fantastic. So much clearer to me than the player handbook slash game mastery guide. And I do specifically know times when I would be sitting there playing a game live and have to try and figure out which book I need to look into, or PDF, or however you want to do it. But I remember very specifically having to decide and getting it wrong and then having to go to the other book and just kind of wasting time. The fact that this is all in one book in a way that really makes sense is going to be super helpful. I am disappointed that there is no NPC gallery. And I kind of paused there because I was trying to decide how strongly I want to put it. No, it's disappointment. I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Which is possibly worse. The NPC gallery, why isn't that in GM Core? That just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Monster Core, it's one of those things where I can see the argument for it going in there, but why? If it does, I'll be thrilled to have it back. But I really am missing the NPC gallery. Aside from that, I don't have anything big detractions out of there. Snares, I hope they show up somewhere. I don't specifically remember using snares very much. And I say I don't remember. I can't recall a single instance where I've used a snare that I've added in a game. However, I can see their utility. So it'd be nice to see them come back in some way in a current book, so you don't have to go to, you have player core, you have GM core, we're going to have monster core, and we're going to have player core too. I don't want to have to go to a fifth book in order to look up snares or an NPC gallery. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I wish that would have been brought in as well. Now, I do hope you like this overview. It was quite a bit shorter than the player core one because there wasn't that many changes. It was just kind of bringing everything together in a way that makes a lot of sense, and they were very successful in doing that. But I do hope you like this video, and if you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.